first of all, question. Do we need a translation into Spanish? You want one? Like in Espanol? Everybody speaking English? More or less? No, un poco. Okay. Because we somehow agreed that then we will swap between languages. Ignacio speaks perfectly Spanish, and so we can swap a little bit. First of all, welcome to our workshop. I think it's not the best place to do workshop. First of all, you have been here the whole day, yesterday the whole day, and now again for a workshop. You're sitting in a row, which I think is not good to do a workshop. So we will get you a little bit moving. We want with you to share some insights and some experience and reflect upon some of these questions we're putting up. Is the translation working? Okay, so I just keep on talking. Okay. So first of all, of course, maybe some of you also have asked yourself, is that what I'm doing as an educator? Having an impact. Do I have an impact on the children, on the way planning happens? I remember when I started off doing architecture education or built environment education, for me it was a lot about giving them the knowledge, the empowerment to actually be better, to be able to be better participating in the co-construction of cities and spaces and so on. But we have all these other aims, you know, UAA aims list, aims of built environment education. I think there are about 10. Yeah? And of course you wonder, do we really fulfill these aims? Do we have an impact short-term, long-term on that? So we want to discuss with you these outcomes and impacts of architecture education, of course from your perspective, because we have 2 kids up here, and I think my daughter also said she wants to discuss, but we don't have the kids. It would be perfect to have the kids and ask them, so what you're learning, what you're taking from us, but normally even if you ask them that question, they don't answer, or they give strange answers. I remember I asked a kid, so what did you learn? I learned how to use a scissor. Okay. So I think these are the stories we want to hear from you. You've been working out there in the field. You maybe are working also as a researcher. You have been looking at projects. We want to share these moments of insights where you have somehow gotten an idea what this impact and outcomes are. First of all, we want to ask you, do you see this correlation between built environment education with children, young peoples, and participation? Do you see short-term or mid-term or even long-term changes in these contexts where you have been working? And I know some of you have already been in practice for some years, maybe working always in the same cities and communities. Do you see any change of your work? So we want to hear that with you. We want to reflect also on the impacts on several levels. We can reflect on what impacts do we have on the kids, of course. We wrote participants, it could be adults. Maybe some of you have worked with adults. Or teachers, which are maybe also a learning person in this whole process when you as architects go into schools and make projects. And also on the other side, outside of the participant view, the impact you've seen in the built environment, which is maybe one thing we can discuss very easily, the impact on the built environment. Do we see some physical change? Do we have a better built environment if we do participation or built environment education? On the community, on the society at large. Of course, I think the last society of large is a very big question. Do we have an impact on society with the work of what we do? But at least the newspapers, as I heard today, here in the region are full of information about Ludantia. So society is reading about architecture education. Do we have an impact? Would be interesting to talk about that. We want to do this by, we give you a short introduction and make it even shorter that we have more time. And we want to have your individual reflection upon these questions, and we put them up here, and you see these papers. And yes, we get you moving. We want to get your minds moving, and we want you to get discussions moving, maybe at the beginning between 2 of you or 3 of you. So I think we should take, at least we said 25 minutes, maybe since we are late, maybe we say 15 minutes or 20 minutes, we'll see how much time we need. And I want you all to come up here, to bring a pen if you have one. And we have these enormous, I've never seen post-its this big. Actually, I asked for small post-its this size, and I wanted to give you all like a package, because I love this size. You only can put 2 words on that. You don't have to think of a whole sentence, just 2 words, keywords. Yeah? So now you can put extra large keywords up here. Yeah? Take 20 minutes, just go from question to question. Do you have anything to share? Note down some words, some keywords, and after moving around, we then have a discussion between all of us. We said 25 minutes. If we need 20 minutes or 30 minutes, it's fine too. And we also prepared something little at the end, because I don't know if you ever tried at the end of any workshop you're doing on architecture education project to get feedback from the kids. Have you ever tried that at the end, asking how did you like it? Okay, somebody's nodding his head. Anybody else? Okay, good. Let's share about that. How do you do this? Because I brought one method with me, because I often experience when I try just talking, they're not saying anything. I think to share some of these methods to get reflections from the kids, from the young people we're working with, this is something I want to do at the very end. So we will look at the time. I also prepared a presentation just in case. The presentation is just in case if you're not want to talk. Yeah? So if I feel like this is going slow, then I take over the talking. But it would be much nicer to first hear your shares and hear your experience. That this is the plan for this next hour. So, anything to translate?
This is working? I don't think so, but if anyone needs clarification of any of the objectives or the question for that matter, feel free to ask me. And I guess with no further ado, we ask the people in the over there to step down and just go and have a look to the question and take a few minutes.
You can write either way.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. Just
él habla español muy bien. Yo puedo leerlo, pero no hablo muy.
No Finnish though. No Gallego. So either English or Spanish would work. Yeah, or Portuguese. I don't speak any Portuguese.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So get up, get moving, bring a pen. Take one of these enormous post-its if more needed. We put already some on, but like I said, there are more sitting here. 20 minutes. If you did not understand what we want you to do, just come and ask us here. Any answers or experiences you have answering these questions that are up on the wall, please.
Also suggestions. Yeah, we're not looking for ultimate answers for this question,
which you probably don't all have.
And don't ask us what the answers are, because we don't know either.
And you can talk to each other, eh? You don't have to be silent. And you also can write, I never thought about that. I have no evidence. Who has? Just give us some ideas to be talking later. You need more Post-its? Anybody needs more Post-its? We have these enormous, huge, and small ones. If you just want to grab a small one. Ja.
Ist es wieder? Ja. Ist das letzte?
Ein bisschen größer.
Das ist richtig gehen.
Sí, sí. Sí.
You can now read the questions in the screen.
I see even people drawing. You can use sign language to communicate if you want to. Also, if you see a comment or something somebody wrote and you think, yes, that's it, I totally agree, please let us know. Put, I totally agree, yes. Or even, are you real? Do you really think this is the answer? Is that really your experience? Let's talk. You can put your email address next to it and then this person can contact you. Feel free to take one. Oh, thanks. Aber den kann ich dir auch noch geben. Muss nicht mitnehmen. Kriegst du als PDF. Besser leeres Gepäck. Entonces, 5 más minutos. Noch 5 Minuten. 5 minutes more. Haben wir 2 Mikros? Ja. Und kriegt ihr auch ein bisschen zu kommentieren, so nach dem Motto, wer hat denn das geschrieben? Kannst du 3 Worte dazu sagen? Okay. Shall we open the discussion for everybody? Shall we open the discussion for everybody? Okay. No, te queda aquí, eh? If you want to, you can come up here, stay close or wherever, look at the answers, and I'm going to put up also some slides, but
Si no es arquitectura, entorno construido, ¿no? Habría eso sí que sacar un poco la discusión sobre, en la manera más clásica, qué se considera arquitectura, ¿no? Claro, aquello que los arquitectos hacen o no.
what we're going to do now is basically, Ignacio? What we're going to do now is we're taking turn. Ignacio will look at some of the answers, some of the statements, and will maybe ask you, who wrote this? Can you say 2 or 3 words more? Everybody who feels like he wants to share something when it comes to this question, just start talking. I think I maybe have to move around with my microphone. I have prepared some slides because there is not really much architecture research out there on impact and outcomes of built environment education. But long time ago, actually really about 7 years ago, I wrote a paper and I looked at research that was done which comes close to architecture education. I mean, we do have overlappings with arts education, for example, and with cultural education. And indeed, when it comes to that, there's quite some research out there. So we will take turns. I will present something I found in research, but it's mostly coming more from arts education and from cultural education. But this maybe inspires our discussions. But we start off first, of course, with what you have been putting here and what statements, and even the children put statements up here. Ignacio.
Yes, before we start, I just want to point out something that probably none of you said out loud, and namely that we have make a slight distinction between built environment education and architecture education. For sure, they're not the same thing. They're close to one another, but reflect upon that because maybe we can link this discrepancy to the overall discussion. And well, let me begin with the first question. How do kids, based on their experience with architecture/built environment educations, influence their social movement, their social environment, sorry. For instance, parents, friends, and so on and so forth. So some of the proposals, I would not call them answer because this is not what we intended for the workshop today, goes as follow. Just by doing, promoting, influencing, facilitating. I think it works better. It's not a criticism, but when you synthesize your ideas in just one word, yeah? But nevertheless, you see that in the longer formulations, these words come every now and then. So it seems to be some points of encounter, which is always positive. Also, the potential of the influence is huge. I would like to know who wrote that. Because it's very enthusiastic, yeah? It gets things going, but it does not solve the quintessence of the question, which is how you can achieve, yeah, or how you can at least try to do that. Yeah? I'm not calling names in order to expose you to the other, but just to maybe have the chance to elaborate a little bit more on this reflection. So, who was the one who put out this? Where was that?
You want to comment?
Here. Anyone? Yeah, Auspanish says, el potencial de influencia es enorme. In Portugal. So we know now who may that be. Okay.
Can you explain? What do you mean?
Yeah. Can you repeat? I don't remember. Yeah. So you completely fine. No, you wrote that the potential of influencing is huge, yeah, and then their influence. I am assuming the one from children in Portugal, it's almost none whatsoever, but there is a right to participate, yeah. So, but I would like to focus on the first part of the sentence. So, why do you say the potential of influencing is huge? Where do you see this potential, and how do you think the potential can be articulated?
Oh, wow. I didn't see that. Sorry.
So get ready because some of you may be called upon later.
Intento hablar un poco español. De mi experiencia como maestro y padre, miro los otros miro los niños como ciudadanos primero. Y en cuanto a ciudadanos, tiene derechos y obligaciones. Y mi experiencia no les he dado oportunidad para hablar y de cuestionar sus derechos en ninguna ocasión. Pero creo que estamos muy retardos en relación a eso. Y que los niños, que se debe enseñar a leer y a contar, pero a ser ciudadanos de primera desde el primer día que ingresan en la escuela. Y ser ciudadanos de cuestionar sobre su entorno, sobre la escuela, sobre su playground, sobre su camino a la escuela y sobre todas las escuelas, todas las cosas que son en su entorno. Pero en mi experiencia eso no existe nada.
Good, thank you.
We maybe have to translate that in English.
Yeah, does anyone need actual English translation?
Yeah, I would say so.
Well, it's a sort of biographical reflection, what he just did, because on his experience, both as a parent, as a teacher, he says that children had a lot of input, but there is a lack of knowledge and creativity, or even take the time to bother to reflect upon how can we take this input of children and make it something practical. Yeah? Well, he probably said a lot more than that, but that's what I can now concretize. But I guess his call is in one way or another to, and I mentioned that in a small discussion we had just a few minutes ago, to have a little more of empathy. And this is a personal opinion of mine. There is almost no chance to get closer to children and youngsters as well if you don't learn how to put yourself on their position and how to at least imagine how they see the world, what's important for them. And it's also rather oxymoronic if you think about it, because all of us have been children and young adults at one point of their lives. And it seems we choose to forget what it was like, yeah, in order to have some sort of, I don't know, upper hand and tell the children and youngsters what they're, have to do, how they're better off, etc., etc.
I'm seeing an interesting answer here. Number one, how do kids, based on their experience with architecture, influence their social environment, parents, friends, how they experience it? And one wrote, number one, when the project involves the school and the local community. Number two, at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. Number three, when the project is a real project. Who wrote that? Mm-hmm. You want to comment on that?
It says here, at the dinner table, to quote Rasmus Frist. Go for it.
I think you all, when you answer, you need a phone, because then our translator can translate.
Okay. So the first I wrote was when it involves the community and the school. Yeah. So I'm not an architect. My background's in environmental geography. I'm doing a thesis right now, and so this is pertaining to my research. So I found in my research that what seems to be working from the 5 organizations I've studied is that it has to be a real project. So the people I've interviewed are doing architecture, urban planning in schools, lining up with school curriculum. But the projects are real, they're built, they're actually created. And so this is why I say it has to involve the community. And the other part is where I list the municipal government, so on, is because the children with some of these organizations, they actually present to their community. The projects are voted on, decided on, and then they also present to the local government. So they carry it right through the whole design process. And the reference to the dinner table is by Rasmus Frisk, who is an architect in Copenhagen. So they also have projects working in schools, and this is a direct quote from my interview with him. So he says this is how they reach the parents, is because they are teaching the kids in the schools. The kids go home, have dinner, and the parents say, how was your day? What did you do? And they start saying, oh, I did this, I did that. So that's why he says you reach the parents at the dinner table. So,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, my kids sometimes don't tell me anything. So maybe a question to all of you. Have you had the experience that beyond, I mean, the kids in your workshop, you're reaching more persons? And if yes, who and how? Anybody? At least I saw people shaking heads here. You want to say something? Yeah.
Okay, so I stand up. I carried out some projects. One is in rural parts of China, but I only have one case study there. Another one is a curriculum design project for primary schools that we have more members, around 29 primary schools in China from 23 provinces. So for the first one, in the rural part, actually we did some regeneration workshops for a local village. And the idea is that we invite all the kids, and it's mixed age, to this. It's a 2-day workshop, and from the beginning they need to know what to tell something. We have handouts, worksheets for them to introduce them some ideas of the what a community is. And the part is that normally these kids don't have such a chance in villages. And some of the villagers, and they're very busy with the farming things daily. And if they're very busy, they just leave the television to their kids. So for the 2-day workshop, we ask that at least one parent should come with them, or grandparent, but we prefer more parents. And they should sit aside and don't interfere with all the courses, but they have to watch and the kids. So the kids, the first thing is, it might take a bit longer. So the first part is that we want to have a group decision, like we have 16 to 20, vary from the first time to the last day. And we want them to decide how to group themselves up. And I have 4 colors of papers, and I ask them, what colors you like. And I heard the kids said, I like blue. But finally we thought that when we line them up, we found all the little ones get the blue paper. That means the elder ones give out the chance, so they stand behind the little ones. So that was quite touching also. For some of the villagers, they didn't maybe notice such aspect of our kids. And also I jumped the part, it's quite a lot of information to share, but one thing is that they tell something that the parents never, also the administrators of the village, never think about, because they used to have all the flowers in the village. Then for economic reasons, after the earthquake happened in 2008, in southwest part of China, that the economic changed to plant a lot of bamboos. So one section is that we ask them to think what parts of the village they like most, what kind of flavors, what kind of scents you like most. So some of the kids read poetry sentences that also really touching. And in the last, the administrator is something like the dean of the village, stay with us for the whole 2-day workshop. And the second day, they also invite some of the people from neighboring villages to come to see the final result. So I think that might give an example of how, if we design or curate such activities in a very good condition, that we may reach some positive outcomes of the village. And the kids feel very positive because they think they can fulfill something, and their opinions can be heard, and their parents really give them very, very nice and positive feedbacks. So that's my experiences.
May I say a word? A word? Okay.
Sorry, but I'm also looking at the watch, and we have 4 questions,
Yeah.
and
So
I just thought we only have half an hour. And Ignacio, real quickly,
Yeah.
because I want to share one thing. Like I said, I looked in the literature and I looked what research is out there. There's a lot on cultural education, on arts projects and effects of art projects on students and young people who have been in these projects, and some impacts and effects you see here. Actually, the study it's been taken from Pipa Lord, impacts for pupils and young people from arts and education initiatives. Like I said, it's arts education, but effects they have found studying different arts projects were enjoyment, simply. What we also often hear that for them, as soon as something happens outside of school, they enjoy it a lot more. Somehow school, like being in a school, is always seen as a pleasure. Arts form, knowledge, of course, skills, social, cultural effects, thinking skills, personal development, communication, expressive skills. I totally can confirm that. I'm experienced when we have kids who come more often to us, or schools we do on a regular basis projects with, I see they're picking up language, words of architecture, of planning, and they're developing skills of presenting, for example, explaining a model they did or a drawing they did, the more often they do. So I totally can agree on that. Change in attitude towards involvement, I could maybe that's something we could also find in architecture education if you're involved on a regular basis in projects like that. But I think this is an interesting study to have a look at and then reflect, okay, is that something I should look for also in architecture education? By the way, the studies I'm quoting, they are also in a paper that is up here and you can pick it up when you go out. Real quick question. Yeah.
It's not a question, but there is a dissertation by Kari Bjørka Hodneland from Norway, who made a project a whole year with a school class, and they did a lot of workshops and things like that. And she wrote about that and the method and so on. And then she met some of the pupils 10 years after, and she asked them, what did you learn? And they told her, I learned a lot. It was a wonderful part of my education, so it could really make a mark.
Yeah.
Second question.
Moving to the second question, how can kids be turned into more knowledgeable users of space through architecture/built environment education? And as such, how can they be more often engaged with participatory process and render more confident while discussing with experts? I have just done a quick screening of the answers, and I know these are two questions combined into one, but nevertheless, is eye-catching the fact that most of the proposals deal with the first part of the question. And I think that shows that it's quite hard to tackle the second part, because in a way, how can we create some sort of leverage for children and young adults to confront discussion with experts, if experts, on the other hand, are not either trained or willing even to have a real serious discussion with either children or young adults. So I see that, particularly in this input. It says here, through programs of urban pedagogy that uses play as a tool of learning. I think that's fantastic, but that only solves one part of the question. So I would like to know if the person who wrote that has any idea to move that input to the other part of the question. It was in Spanish. It says, a través de programas de pedagogía urbana que utilicen el juego como herramienta de aprendizaje. Who was it? Okay. So ¿puedes elaborar un poco en...?
Pero necesita... muy bien, una más.
Sorry, I'm going to speak in Spanish because I can't...
No hay problema.
Okay. A ver, yo creo que utilizar el juego como una herramienta clave que puede ayudar a fomentar el interés por por la ciudad y por la arquitectura, se puede hacer. Incluso utilizar la propia ciudad como un tablero de juego a través de gincanas, a través de recorridos exploratorios, a través de juegos de encontrar pistas o de este tipo de cuestiones. Yo creo que está muy bien porque trabaja como esas tres dimensiones de la pedagogía urbana, ¿no? Por un lado, estás dentro de la ciudad, aprendiendo de la misma, interesándote de la misma, que en muchas ocasiones nosotros aprendemos la propia ciudad o los niños y niñas aprenden de la propia ciudad en los propios centros educativos. Entonces, claro, la vinculación que se puede dar entre ese conocimiento y el niño va a ser muy reducida. Eso por un lado, ¿no? Y yo creo que salir a la calle a hacer de exploradores es una de las primeras acciones que puede fomentar que luego esos niños y niñas puedan participar posteriormente y entender también o explicarles de qué forma el diseño de esas ciudades les influencia en su vida diaria, ¿no?
Y un poco, ¿no?, cómo ese proceso ya de experimentación de primera mano, por llamarlo de algún modo, de la ciudad, podría llevar eventualmente a que niños y jóvenes, ¿no?, tengan un poco más de confianza a la hora de encararse, entre comillas, ¿no?, con un arquitecto o con un planificador urbano o un diseñador urbano. O sea, ¿cómo imaginas, ¿no?, que ese momento lúdico se transforme, ¿no?, en una herramienta de seguridad que necesitas a esas edades para enfrascarte en una discusión con un adulto?
Nosotros en alguna ocasión hemos desarrollado proyectos donde hemos pedido a los arquitectos, arquitectas de la municipalidad que explicaran con un lenguaje sencillo, ¿no?, cuáles eran como esas cuestiones que de alguna forma afectaban a los niños y a las niñas. Y por otro lado también hemos invitado a esos niños y niñas a que diseñaran sus propios espacios de juego, ¿no?, dentro de la ciudad. Por tanto, se han sentido corresponsables de esa tarea y se han como resignificado, se han empoderado, se han sentido importantes, ¿no?, y se han sentido escuchados sobre todo. Entonces eso también les anima a participar.
And I think now you have to translate in English.
Yeah, I have to. Well, rather than translate it, I will do my best to synthesize what she explained.
Sorry.
So basically the point is there are 3 dimensions of urban pedagogy. And that allows children and ¿has trabajado con jóvenes o no?
Niños de 8 a 11 años.
Okay, so mostly children, according to her experience, and this eventually enables, so to speak, children to feel co-responsible in a way in the process of decision making of how the places where they would go and play, and I don't know if that's in the classical sense of playgrounds or we're talking about more squares, open squares or things like that. Yeah, so that was basically the point. So you expose first children to their city, to their neighborhoods, in order to gain spatial knowledge, and that knowledge is therefore or thereby deployed in order to gain not only more confidence, and I think it's wonderful to underscore the element of co-responsibility. Not in a bad sense of telling children, well, you now have to back up your decisions or anything like that, but I think that helps to integrate them and to make them more fully engaged in the whole process of participation. I hope I managed.
Yeah, maybe one response out of the research world. I looked at a study. Actually, I did a project myself within this whole project series, doing like a participatory design with a youth group in a small town. And later on, I found out that some people from social work from a university close by, they evaluated all projects. So just one was mine. And they talked to the young people, asking them about the education process within the participation process. So there have been these participatory projects, and they asked them, what did you learn? And some things the kids would answer, the young people, they are all teenagers, rather like 15 and older. They would say, well, I did learn how to analyze and develop ideas, design ideas for an object that is been built. And I learned how to present and negotiate. Because as soon, at least in Germany, as soon as you do some construction, we may also have informal construction, but I think most things you need a permit for. So if you want to construct something, even something small, you need a permit for. And you have to get that permit. You have to argue for that. And you have to present your ideas in front of the city council at times. And so that's what I learned. Present their ideas and negotiate them, advocating for their own interest. They also learned making compromises. Because I think I said it before, especially youth projects, they face quite some prejudice. Now the troublemakers are basically redesigning a plaza. Is that a good idea? And they're making compromises with other needs of store owners or of neighboring institutions and so on. So, and they made experiences with democratic decision making, which in Germany needs quite some time. You have this council, and you have this council, and this council, and then it takes time to get your permit, your democratic right to do something. It takes time. So they made experience with that. I'm speeding up a little because I see we only have like 15 minutes left. So,
Okay.
Second question?
No, the third question.
Sure, third question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how could teachers in school fulfill the role of an educator in built environment / architecture? And what role do architects, planners, designers, artists have as educators in schools? This was a somewhat mean-intended question, and I gather from the possibilities that you have communicated in the post-it that it is either or. So either the teacher learns about built environment and architecture education, yeah, or it makes it possible for the architect, the planner, the artist to step into the school and still in a limited range of action say something about what architecture or built environment is. So I guess this poses a nice dilemma because in my opinion, the teachers have a lot to learn, yeah, but not in order to then teach. Yeah, they are themselves also part of the target group, so to speak. Yeah, so I would like to know more about why do you see that the role of the teacher is of a liaison between the architects and children. Who wrote that? Okay.
Do we? Yeah. Pass it on. I think to get moving, but sometimes helps after a whole day of sitting.
In Spanish or in English?
I think English would be perfect because then we save time.
Okay. From my experience, when I went to investigate how children perceive their environment, the teachers were liaisons. They helped me to do the project and explain it to the children, and they themselves were learning while I was explaining. That's what I mean by a liaison.
We make a poll. Who thinks that if teachers get an education in their universities on architecture education, how to teach that, do you think they still need architects in schools? Yes or no? Do they need architects?
Yes.
Who is yes?
Yes.
Yes. I would say
Up high.
yes.
So we can see.
Who thinks we can teach teachers everything about architectures? Architects are still needed. That's the question. Yes or no? Yes. Okay. 2/3, I would say. And the rest is rather no, or I don't know, I never thought about it. Susan.
In Sweden, at least, we have 100,000 teachers and 10,000 architects. even if we worked as hell, we could not help all the teachers that would like to help us, have our help. So I think for practical reason, we have to find ways to teach the teachers to use the built environment in all subjects, not only in art and architecture, but you can use the built environment. You go out and study the houses and so on. And I think it's a terrible need to teach the teachers. And if architects meet teachers, that's very good.
Yeah, I would like to add something very quickly. I think part of the crux of the matter, not necessarily the crux of the matter itself, is recognizing that you may be pretty good at what you're doing and know a lot about it, but that does not necessarily mean that you're good in transferring that knowledge or that ability. And I think that's the big challenge when we tackle the second part of the question. So what is the role of architects, planners, designers? They can be architects, like they're called nowadays, but could they descend to the level of actually being able to convey the ideas in such a way that children can incorporate them and internalize them? So I would say, because I experienced that myself when I was studying architecture, that some of my professors were very good professionals, but very lousy teachers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something?
Mm-hmm.
But are they learning to teach as well? They teach. Yeah, they're teaching, but are they learning to teach?
Are they learning to teach the teachers?
Or to teach themselves?
Now, the people who are teaching the schools already have, they're architects? Yeah, it's better. One of the organizations I'm teaching, they are architects who teach, but they're specializing in teaching. So they bring in other architects from in Canada, so it's the Ontario Association of Architects. So I can't speak to any part else of Europe, but in Canada, if you are a licensed architect, you have to have so many hours with your organization for each province. So they have lined it up also with the Association of Architects so that they get credit, basically. So they bring in other architects who aren't necessarily part of their key team, but they teach them how to teach their program, and they teach alongside with the other architects. And so it seems to be working. The kids seem to be really enjoying it. They don't teach the teachers to teach because they feel very strongly that only architects can teach, because they get into really specific things. When the children build the models, is to scale. So, but it is lined up with all the math science curriculum, so it's easy to bring into the school. So they've been teaching, I forget how many schools now, in 14 districts or something in Ontario, and also teaching in the US and Chicago area. Okay. So
that's what I find, what I can form in practice too.
Yeah.
The discussion I'm finding in Germany is exactly between these two poles. On the one hand, we are not enough architects to win every school, so somehow we have to bring the knowledge to teacher. Give them methods, give them materials for them to be able to teach architecture. Actually, we're making the experience they're not using that material. And on the other hand, there is this discussion going on, like, what's the value? What is the big value of an architect doing architecture education in school? Yeah. I've not found a study on that. I found a study of artists being in school. Yeah. But when I read what they found out, if you swap the word artist and make it architect, it somehow made a lot of sense to me. That when you come as an outsider, as an architect to school, you are not a teacher. At least to me, when I go in schools and do projects, first thing teachers tell me, no, I'm sorry, my kids cannot do this. And actually, it's really great when I come from the outside and do things. So I have a different perspective. It influences the teachers a lot and the teaching team. That's what they found out about artists in school. It alters the knowledge of the teachers, the knowledge they have of their students. Remember, they cannot do this, and then the teachers are totally surprised what their students can do because we don't see them every day. It totally makes sense, these findings to me. and they have an authentic aesthetic experience. Like I said, this is artists in school. But I found this study very interesting. Sorry to cut, but you see this is a very interesting question to be thinking about, what our role is as architects and planners in schools versus what role teachers can take. We need them, I totally agree on that, but I think we have different roles, and both roles have their value. Okay, I think last question.
Yeah. Last but not least, so how does built environment / architecture education lead to a demand for a living environment of a higher quality? And how may built environment / architecture education activities foster changes in socio-political and discussion and policy making? Well, among the possibilities exposed here, it caught my eye, the one here synthesized in 4 points. So, better citizens for the future, more democracy, more community exchange, impact on politicians. So, who wrote that? Okay, so go for it. And can you elaborate a little bit more on...
Can you pass the microphone?
Not on the 4 points, but maybe, well, out of my own interest, what do you mean by more democracy? And particularly, how do you foresee this transition of children becoming into more and better citizens of the future?
Well, actually, I already said it this morning in my lecture, so I will be repeating myself, but I think built environment education for children, which will be the future citizens, is actually the answer, the short answer. And since they will not be necessarily architects, but maybe politicians, maybe our clients, maybe decision makers, I think built environment education, it's to learn all the quote-unquote vocabulary to be partners of the city, our partners, and to make good decisions later on. I don't know if I answer it, because we could talk about it a long time, but in a short way. Are you satisfied, or shall I continue?
Yeah, it's, to me, it's a hope we have. We don't have evidence that it really is happening. I totally agree on that. It's kind of like, that's what we hope for. We hope that if they have learned a lot about the built environment, they are part of an educational process, learning about the built environment. And I think participation is even more a learning process. If you're really able to shape something, then maybe when you're an adult, you make different decisions. Actually, I think it would need a long-term study to really prove that this is happening. But I totally agree on you. But like I said, it's a hope we have. Or do we have evidence here in the room? Do we have evidence? I mean, we have one evidence, you saying, you're meeting students after 10 or 20 years that tell you, I've really learned something in this project. It would be good to have to talk to them in 20 or 30 years. So now you're a professional, does it still stick into your mind? Do you read the newspapers differently?
But I don't understand why you say what you said, because if you don't learn mathematics, you will not be able to count. And if you don't learn built environment education, you have no chance to understand anything. So we have no proof and no guarantee, but it's happening. And if you don't learn to read and letters, you won't be able to read books, you won't be able to participate in anything. So I think built environment education is the same. No guarantee that you will be a great mathematician if you have mathematics, but you know.
I totally agree on you, but like as a scientist talking, I'm saying, okay, let's do a study on that to really find some points to make sure, because we always have to argue what we do. I mean, music in school has to argue their impact, arts has to do, and I think architecture too. I think the more arguments we have, also findings of evidence that this is really happening. Because, I mean, there have been generations growing up without architecture education. and democracies is still there. So, but still, so I think that's an interesting discussion to me.
But I think there is an element, I'm sorry to weigh in all of a sudden, of tension, because if we really want to move a little bit beyond the narrow sense of democracy, being able to go and decide who the president is or the mayor, etc., we have to go beyond that, because how do you teach children who do not vote and do not have a say in such a democratic practice, that they are part of enriching democracy itself? So if we are aiming to create better citizens for the future in a democratic system, the notion of democracy as we know it now has to be challenged, in my opinion, because otherwise they have to wait until their turn, I don't know, 18 or 21 even, to be able to start legitimately participating in democratic processes.
But
so it's, well...
Democracy is not only voting, it's participating in the city life.
Yeah, but tell that to politicians.
That means also that you are able to give your opinion if you want this or this to be constructed in front of your door and participate to the community life. This is democracy. It's not necessarily to vote.
Yeah. No, I agree. But the thing is, fixed on our heads, I think it's ingrained somehow that democracy equals going to vote. But I agree with you. It's much more than that. Yeah. The question is, how do we go beyond that?
I'd like another angle of the democracy and how children learn in school, because at least in Sweden we have some projects where children really have participated in planning process, and in some projects they really made a change. Of course, they learned something at the same time, but we can, if we scientifically would like to do a measure, we could look for all the projects where the children really made a change. That's perhaps easier than wait 10 years and ask afterwards.
Yeah, I always like to talk about this one project I did, and it's a youth project, and it got burnt down, and they asked me to come in again to do a workshop with these young people to rebuild it. And I came, the kids laid down a plan. This is how we want to do it. We thought about it, we discussed it all through. This is how we're going to do it. And I'm like, oh, so you don't need me? No. So they really learned something from the first process. So this is a very big evidence, and it would be interesting.
We're being told that time's over, but go ahead.
Oh, time's over. But one more comment. You have the last comment.
Maybe we don't have as research a longitudinal study of what we've done 20 years ago and what is the outcome now. But we are often parents, and there are second and third generation of architects' parents, and we know that the interest we give to our kids towards the society and the built environment, it stays with the kids. And we have now a generation of kids who are interested in the environment, who intervene, who has an opinion on it, who think they can be active. And I think maybe it's not longitudinal, but we can say that when we arouse interest, there is an impact. And our kids are not always architects, they do a lot of things, but still they see architecture and they understand things, and understanding the word, I think, makes you a kind of, it makes you strong, that you understand something. And if you don't, nothing else, but just this understanding the city, understanding the neighborhood, understanding the location is already quite strong.
Nice last word, thank you. Thank you to all of you for participating, writing up here, answering some of our questions. Here's a paper I wrote some years ago on exactly that topic. Challenge it. It's already, I think, some years old, so, and developments have gone further. We are a lot bigger community of built environment education now, I think. There's a lot more built environment participation going on, to me, on a very nice level at times. So I think these are questions we cannot answer fully. I cannot answer fully, but I think it's worthwhile to think about them. At least I like to discuss them and pull them up once in a while to reflect upon them. Ignacio, anything?
And before you all dismiss, we will highly appreciate if you afterwards can share some thoughts and reflections about the workshop itself. Yes. What was not that good, what can be improved, etc. But I think we have to call it a day now, because they're preparing for the next presentation right after the pause. But we're out of time, aren't we?
We're out of time. I wanted to do with you a little exercise. Okay, but at least I tell you about it. Because especially when we do, like in high school, a project, and we ask them at the beginning, at the end, how you liked it, they usually don't talk to us. At least teenagers, they don't like to talk. Young kids maybe are more forward, saying like, I like to cut with your scissor and so on. But so what we did is we had a collection of postcards, and I brought play cards with me, and they're very funny looking. And we asked the students to pick any of these cards and tell us, give us a feedback about the workshop. And one student would pick this hour saying, you know, I would have liked more time. Or maybe a student would say, you know, I would have really liked if this was over much sooner. Or they would say, this is like a, yeah, I don't know if you can see. This is a very detail of a city, of a sewage system. They would say, I learned to see details of the neighborhoods I've never seen before, you know? So get a crazy collection of postcards, whatever you find. Could be a Christmas card even. And they could pick one and say, you know, this was a celebration. Or they said, no, this was way too playful and cheesy, and I could not really relate to what we were doing here. I think this works with anything, an abstract project on architecture atmosphere, but it also could be a participatory design project. And if you want quick responses, stack of postcards, let the kids grab one, ask them what they want to say with this card. I wanted to do it with you, but we're out of time. Sorry. So I sent you to the break. Thank you for discussing with us.